Hey guys, and welcome to Cannamantv. My name is Connor McLeod, and in this episode I chat with the founder of We The Undersigned, Phil Monk, where we discuss creative processes, the neurological basis of cannabis and creativity, and the generally accepted dose required in order to instigate creativity with cannabis. So, make sure to like and subscribe, and stick around until the end, so you don't miss out on the end of episode cartoon. Now then, let's talk cannabis. Since we're relatively short on time, both of us here, Phil, obviously I'm aware you've got things going on. I've only got about half an hour here. We'll get straight into creativity then. The reason why I got in contact with you, Phil, was I was aware, I watched your video about, is it Words of Wisdom? Is that right?
Words of Weed and Wisdom.
Yeah, there we go. I heard your thing and it was really good. And it was interesting because I've kind of wanted to talk about cannabis and creativity for a while.
Yes.
As you know, it's extremely under-researched, if anything, area for cannabis.
It is, and the research is a bit conflicting as well.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually. I've actually got a couple of notes here on that exact point, which I'll get to in a minute.
My copy has disappeared off the bookcase. We have a different version, actually. The one that came before Words of Weed and Wisdom was Inside My Hat and Other Heads.
Right.
So Words of Weed and Wisdom is the second book.
Right.
This is the first one here, collated by Alan Buffrey, who is a veteran human rights campaigner.
Right.
And he's collected the writings, musings, and ramblings of various campaigners from the UK and around the world, I believe. And yeah, he's selling this through Amazon, £10 and a penny, free delivery.
I'll put it in there. I'll put anybody listening, I'll put the link in the description below.
Brilliant, thank you. £3.36 will go to the WTU campaign, the legal fees that we were actually raising to take the government to court, basically.
Cross-culturally, everybody's familiar with the basis of cannabis that instigates creativity. Extremely low level of research to kind of back it up, so it's anecdotal at best. So what would you say your relationship with cannabis and creativity, in particular poems, and I think you said you do carvings and sculptings, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, my relationship with cannabis, I suppose, it's just an integral part of my life. It's as simple as that. If I didn't have cannabis, it would feel like a big part of my life was missing. I spent my whole life believing I didn't have a creative bone in my body.
Right.
I remember the first time I ever got creative with words was when I was still fit and mobile and strong. I used to smoke buckets.
Yeah.
Anyone doesn't know, it's a gravity water bong. I used to be fit and strong, so I would have one of those before going out for a jog, actually, because I found it would allow me to run further, harder, and more intensely, and really allow me to train a lot harder. Right. So before I went for a mountain bike ride, before I went running up and down a mountain or jog around the block, I'd have a bucket or two. And people say it takes away your motivation and that, but I found the opposite. It gets me going. So anyway, and as I was jogging, words just started rolling in my head about the trees around me and things, my feelings, and they started taking on a rhythm and a flow. And I made myself start carrying a piece of paper and a pencil so I could just write them down immediately, because I learned that if you didn't get them down straight away, you would quite possibly lose those words.
Yeah.
And I just built up poems like a line at a time over a long time, if you like. And I just found that every time it was whilst high, my creative juices started to flow. You asked, you messaged me beforehand, what do you do to make your poems? This often is the precursor to many of my poems. Right. I'll have a bong, and on the back of that bong, my thoughts began to flow, rhythms and creativity comes. Now, when it was with the wood, I'd lose myself in the wood, and I'd be in a rhythm, in a flow, and I'd just keep going. I mean, we're talking 8 hours, 10 hours. You'd just be lost, literally lost. You don't eat, you don't drink. I don't even smoke when I was carving. It just hang there unused. And then eventually you'd find something of beauty that was in the wood. You just had to move all the ways to find it. And cannabis used to help me find it.
You hit on the nail on the head there, Phil, when you said flow. You said when you're in the flow. Because Stephen Kotler, I don't know if you're familiar with, he's relatively well known for high performance. He's an author, tons of non-fiction books. And he specialises in high performance for humans, obviously. And one of the things he noticed was that there are neurochemicals which precede high performance and maintain it. And these neurochemicals are dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, oxytocin, and anandamide. And anandamide was the one that stuck in my mind, because
Yeah.
anandamide itself, as you're fully aware, is an endogenous cannabinoid. There we go, exactly. And this is one of the things I found really fascinating, because THC, as you're aware, simulates anandamide when it enters the body. And this is one of the things that I was, through the research, why I wanted to talk to you about this, was I was quite interested about how this actually happens. So what is the neurological basis and which causes creativity? So scientists, the method in which they measure creativity is called divergent thinking. So
That's
what they
right.
do is, it's a scientific measure for that. It includes brainstorming, creative thinking, free writing to come up with out-of-the-box ideas. Now, out-of-the-box ideas, when they're doing brain scans on the brain activity for creative individuals, excuse me, what they've found is it's the frontal lobe which is predominantly active. So, and when you consume cannabis instigates to the cerebral blood flow to the frontal lobe, which instigates essentially a greater activity in that frontal lobe, which is a consequence, which precedes creative
That
thought.
is the creative flow then.
Exactly. So it's for you to say you're in the flow is exactly
That's
the
a good
point.
way to describe I didn't have words for it. I haven't actually looked into the science like you have there, in all fairness. I have for pain and cancer,
Yeah.
but not so much creativity. And it literally is a flow.
Yeah, and that's what one of the interesting things that he points out is that because of these neurochemicals, it puts you into this zone. Like there's a psychiatrist from Russia that refers to the same thing. That's what he actually articulated, that when people are in the zone, it is these neurochemicals that precede this state of mind. And one of the things I find quite interesting, as you know, I do the Cannamantv comics. That's where obviously this wee guy comes from here, and that's one of the things where it's like I'll put them up now as a wee bit publication as well. It's like the single skinners I'm doing at the moment, so I don't have enough time to do the 8-page single skin, the 8-page full comic. So I was like, I still want to maintain this creative process. So what I did was I just make it so it's a one page comic, and I just do it over and over. I think I'm on 18 or 19 now, something like that. And it's fantastic, Phil. It's really good. And this is one of the things I found interesting, because you've got all these different artists or comedians. When you've got like people like George Carlin, Bill Hicks, you've got Bob Dylan, you've got Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, every single one of them promoting cannabis for creative thought, and yet with no scientific basis. And it's interesting, it's only been in the past 5 or 6 years that we've started to touch on the neurochemistry behind creative states. So when you describe that perfectly, of you're in the flow, it's exactly that. I mean, I think Stephen Kotler actually refers to it as a flow state, you know?
Fancy that, because I was not aware of that area of research. The bulk of my time, in essence, has been for the historical and medical environmental aspects and the history of prohibition. The creativity aspects, I did delve into it, but I couldn't find a great deal. You found more than me, so I'm impressed.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Like
Interestingly as well, when you said that it's kind of inconsistent as well, when you said at the beginning of the interview there that it can be inconsistent, one of the things I found as well, there was this study in 2015 which shows exactly what you'd said, that there's an inconsistency. So creativity is instigated through a low dose of THC, predominantly in the 5.5 milligram region. As soon as it exceeds past this, you become in a situation of a much more inefficient method, because you're intoxicated, essentially. So I think that's what one of the things I'm touching on. It's extremely dosage dependent. So if you have too much of something of cannabis in this state, that you won't be as creative as a smaller dose. So I think that's what they keep touching on, is that dosage is.
I think what that'll come down to there is down to individual exposure and tolerance.
Yeah, most likely. Exactly, tolerance. That's a good point.
I would like to find out the individual where they made that measurement from. Yeah. What was their history?
It wasn't even individual. If I'm being honest, the measurement was based in, I think it was from this study. I think the measurement, it might have been the one in 2014, I'm not sure. But one of the ones I looked in at the measurement was, I think it was at Department of Neurology from Harvard Medical School. I think that might have been them. And they had used mice that have cognitive deficit in their working memory. And this is one of the things. So the working memory, as you're aware, has a storage situation for maintaining large pieces of information that you could then connect thought with. And anandamide is largely responsible for working memory. And this is one of the things that they instigated through that process of these mice that had a deficit in their working memory. When they applied anandamide, it increased their ability to, in the context of the study, at least be creative. And I think they maybe most likely mapped out a map of some degree of trying to find this way through a maze or some degree like that, most likely. But yeah, it's really interesting, Phil, because you mentioned it there a minute ago, you know.
Well, everything you just said in there, right? Mention memory before I forget.
Excuse the pun.
And also the context. So when at university training to become a teacher, I was studying Spanish and English. Teaching English speakers with the languages. It was predominantly a linguistics degree, and I was having to research fields I'd never even thought of, during which I was smoking buckets constantly, not at university, but when I was doing my studies at home privately. When I was writing my essays, I had a bucket beside me, and I was just smoking my bucket as I was writing my essays and my dissertation and everything. And all I had back in feedback apart from being like nearly full marks or full marks for most of my essays, all I had back was how insightful, how perceptive, how deep, all these exclamations of thought where the lecturers themselves hadn't even been in that direction.
Yeah.
Now, that is the heightened cognitive ability from THC, should we call it?
Yeah.
However, how much of my degree can I remember? Not a lot. I do, it gets me through. I remember bits and pieces, but with the pinpoint accuracy I had at the time, I know I haven't got it. I haven't been keeping the knife honed, so it's dull and rusty. But the point is that, yes, it affects memory. And unless you are keeping that context going, it soon gets forgotten about. But that is where it's great for PTSD, because it helps you process memory in that way. So the trauma gets processed easier.
Funnily, you should say that, actually, that I interviewed Dr. Rebecca Moore the other day, and we touched on exactly that point, that PTSD, that cannabis has a extremely efficient way of removing negative memories. And it's actually, I theorised that it's potentially an evolutionary mechanism, because if you're completely overwhelmed by negative memory, it's going to be difficult to function and focus. So to remove these memories, the body's going to have some form of survival mechanism to remove them, and THC comes along and extremely selectively removes negative memories. And I have no idea how it does this. There must be some form of identification through a neurological path that implies negative memory opposed to a positive memory. I have no idea. I would really like to get a neurologist on the channel to discuss this, but again, the research is relatively minimal, so to find one would probably need one in a haystack. What did you say?
They haven't been able to research, really. It's that restrictive. Only specific pharmaceutical companies have been able to research to a great extent. And because it's not a profitable avenue of research as well, you're not going to make a patented product at the end of this research, are you, really? You find out interesting things. You won't make millions in patents. That's why there's been no research.
Yeah, no, fully. I mean, it might help maybe if I had, like, I don't know, a book at the end about making money or something, something like that. But yeah, it's really interesting, Phil, because that's one of the things I've found just through doing my own individual creativity or writing, like that, the book that I wrote. I found that as well. What you described is that you'd be going through a process where you would feel exhausted, fatigued, because you spent so much brain power on this one thing that inevitably people use coffee as a cognitive enhancer, or some people go running or bits and pieces and all that kind of thing. And interestingly as well, a lot of people might not know that coffee, caffeine in particular, binds to CB1 receptor, CB2 receptor, binds to ACB receptor, let's just call it that. So, and again, so it's like, but the endocannabinoid system, essentially what we're dancing around the bush here is exactly that, is the endocannabinoid system is central in creativity. And again, as you're aware, we've just stumbled across this system in the past 20 years and only really starting to take it seriously in the past maybe 8, really.
That's because they've now got about 134 patents for it.
Yeah, exactly. Is that through the GlaxoSmithKline?
The pharmaceutical industry is about to make billions, well, it is, out of what they call cannabis-based medical products.
Yeah.
So they've actually lied to the British public and the whole world for decades, saying, oh, it's a harmful drug, it's going to kill you all and make you go mad. While on the quiet behind the scenes, they've been in researching for medical applications. Now, it's not a medical application, it's actually a dietary application, because, as you've mentioned, the endocannabinoid system is the central system in our body. It's often described as the master control system, whether it's for creativity or for pain. It's the master control system. And I read a paper that talked about the pharmaceutical manipulation of the endocannabinoid system for targeted therapies, which basically means making specific cannabinoid preparations for specific illnesses. But I would call that illness a deficiency. I'd call it an endocannabinoid deficiency that's been inflicted upon generations of people through prohibition. Because humans have eaten cannabis for millennia, we've smoked it, we've built with it, we made clothes out of it, and it's been taken away by a load of dishonest politicians.
Thanks to Phil for giving me his time, and thanks to you for sticking around until the end of the video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed the content. I'll see you next time.